Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm VaultFox, and today I'm going to be showing you how I put together this Ursa Wren helmet from Season 7 of the Clone Wars. To start off with this helmet, I'm using a Bo-Katan Clone Wars helmet base from Project 842. I'll link that file down in the description below. Now, this was before I was able to start printing out my Mandalorian helmets in one piece, and as you can tell, I've got this in a dome piece and a bottom piece, and we've got to get those stuck together. And to do that, I'm just using a sanding sponge that I got from Harbor Freight, sanding down that edge, and I'm going to be applying some super glue onto that just to get everything bonded nicely together. When it comes to super glue, I like to use Bob Smith gap filling super glue in the purple bottle, and I use a little bit of super glue accelerant as well to just get that glue to cure a little bit quicker than it typically will. Spraying all that super glue accelerant on the outside, wiping all the rest of that residue down, and I'm going on to the inside and super gluing the inside seam as well. You can also use E6000, that's actually probably preferable because that's a little bit stronger, but again, super glue works in a pinch, and because I'm going to be using a second technique to bond this seam together, I don't really feel like I need to use E6000 in this instance. And that second technique that I was talking about earlier is using a hot tool or a soldering iron to actually go over that seam line and kind of weld the seam together. Now, I've seen various YouTubers use this, particularly Galactic Armory, a few other folks, and I've never really tried it before because, as you can tell, it's kind of messy, and I thought that it would just make an even bigger mess, but it ended up working out exactly how I needed it to for this instance, and it looks a little bumpy, but I promise you, it is flat. It's going to look bad, but it's okay. You're going to be sanding this down, so don't worry too much about it. Now, if you look at the side of the helmet and the ear caps, there is a little bit of layer shift going on, and to be honest with you, it's really not that bad. I didn't catch it whenever the thing was printing, and I'm just going to go over this with my soldering iron as well to kind of just melt those layers back into each other and get it as straight as possible. Again, we're going to be bondoing and sanding everything down, so I really think that this is something that we'll be able to fix. It's not something that I'm going to need to go back and reprint for sure. Once everything is cooled down, I'm going back over all of those seam lines and just clipping down all of the excess plastic with my plastic clippers. Say hello to my random Heraleku that's on the floor. I keep really good care of all of my cosplay stuff apparently. And once everything is clipped down, I'm going back over with my sanding sponge to just kind of smoothen down those edges a little bit more before we go to the Bondo step. Pretty sure I was filming this on N7 day whenever Jennifer Hale, the awesome voice of Commander Shepard, was going live on Instagram. And so yeah, hi Jennifer Hale, you're awesome, I love you. Anyways, back to the helmet because that's why you guys are here and that's why you're watching this video, so I apologize for all my tangents. But anyways, now we are doing my favorite step, and that is applying some of that forbidden red toothpaste, the almighty Bondo in a tube. I've come to find that Bondo can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people, but in my instance, whenever I'm talking about using Bondo, I'm talking about the Bondo that you can find in a one-part mixture inside of a tube that you typically will pick up from an AutoZone. Sometimes I've even seen it in a Home Depot. I know it's a lot more readily available inside of automotive stores. The actual use for Bondo is to fill in tiny scratches on cars, and in our instance, we're going to be using this to be filling in all of those 3D printing lines that are produced by FDM printing. It's important to be wearing a respirator as well as pretty thick gloves whenever you're globbing this onto your 3D print because it's going to eat through gloves. As you can tell, I'm wearing a blue glove on one hand and the black glove on the other. The black gloves are a lot thicker and they will not eat away at this Bondo material. The blue glove I'm just wearing because I'm not actually smearing anything on with it, and I like to save my black gloves for my Bondo use because they're a lot more expensive and I want to make them last. And all that you're doing here with the Bondo is just trying to get a nice even coat of it all over your print. I don't like to go into the inset things like these ridges on the back because it is a little bit harder to sand that out of there, but everything else I'm giving a nice coat of this stuff so that we can start to get all of that 3D printing nastiness looking thing out of our print, and that was a technical way to describe all of this if I ever came up with one. Once our first layer of Bondo is all cured, after about 4 to 6 hours, I go back in with my mouse sander with 120 grit sandpaper and just go to town on that thing. Basically, what you're trying to do here is trying to get all those high spots down to the low spots and trying to get as even of a surface as you possibly can. Don't worry if you can't get to that right now. We're going to be doing a lot of hand sanding, as you see here with my sanding sponge, and we're going to be adding lots more layers of Bondo and filler primer in the future to get that desired finish for painting. Once I have the surface of the helmet about as smooth as I possibly can get it, I'm going back in with my makeup brush to just kind of get some of the dust off of the helmet, and I'm going back in with a little bit more of hand sanding, and this time I'm using 150 grit, and then I'm adding in another layer of Bondo. I did about 3 layers of Bondo, doing the Bondo, sanding, and then Bondo again process. But again, your mileage may vary, your file may be pretty good and only needs 1 or 2. And in my case, mine needed a couple more because of those layer issues that I had that I needed to cover up. Once all that Bondo is cured and sanded down, it's on to some 2-in-1 automotive filler primer. And this is where all of my crimes are really going to show. This stuff really shows all of the, dips and all of the cracks that are going on in your helmet. And over here on the ear caps, I actually went a little heavy-handed with the Bondo and the filler primer, and I've got to get some of that out of there so that it looks a little bit straighter. And I'm just using a pick that I found at Harbor Freight. I don't even really know what these are called. Don't sue me, I don't really know what things are called whenever I'm working on something. Sorry about that, you have Google, use it. And after a couple passes of some hand sanding, I'm going back in with that 2-in-1 filler primer again, and then it's finally It's finally time to start painting! I'm giving the entire helmet a base coat of dark gray, and it's a Montana gold color. I'll make sure that it's linked down below for you guys. And I say that I base coated the entire helmet, but I ended up not painting the cheeks because I knew that those were going to need to be light gray in the future. So that's what it looked like here. After that dark gray was all nice and cured, I then went over it with some of my blue masking tape and masked off everything that I needed to stay dark gray, and everything that I wanted to paint a light gray was exposed. And here I am going in using my roof color from Montana Gold, and I sprayed that. As you can see here, now I am doing something crazy. And this is kind of where everything goes off the rails because I started to tape everything and I really just started to get stressed out painting this, and I'm kind of only going to be showing you bits and pieces of my process, but most of the things on this helmet were basically masked off with masking tape. As you can tell here, this was me doing the white on the back of the helmet, and I followed a similar method for all of the markings on the front of the helmet as well. It was a lot easier to go back in and paint all of the yellow markings over top of white as opposed to having to do it over top of the dark gray. And like I said, I'm kind of jumping ahead here, and this is how I basically made my templates for those owls that are above Ursa Wren's head. And all I did was I took some of my blue painter's tape and just taped it in the area that I needed my marking to go. And I'm taking a pencil and just kind of free-handing the markings, and this worked out pretty well. I would say that if you're going to do this kind of a method, make sure whenever you are actually attaching this back to your helmet that you're going over all of those lines with some kind of vinyl tape, because I found that the blue painter's tape really does tend to bleed. Again, I kind of went back and did a lot of touch-up work, so I wasn't too worried about it, but here you see me taking off my template and just kind of laying it back down on my workbench. And the reason I'm doing this is because I'm going to actually cut out all of those things that I drew before I go over it with a little bit of a Sharpie. And then I'm going back in with my X-Acto knife and cutting out that template. Now to get the other side of the helmet's template, I'm just taking the one that I just cut out, very carefully taking it off of my board. I basically laid down a bunch of painter's tape to create a template on the board, and I'm just tracing it with a Sharpie, and I'm cutting it out with my X-Acto knife as well. Wow, I really hope that made sense, because that didn't really make sense in my head, but hopefully you can see what I mean by the actual video playing out before you. Guys, I'm not a pro. Once you've got your templates, all you have to do now is just apply them right back onto your helmet. As you can tell here, I did add a little bit more blue painter's tape around the edges just to make sure that it was secure, and also that we protect the rest of the paint job that we've already got on there that we worked so diligently to get. And again, you might have to play around with this to get it to sit as exactly as you want it to, but it's painter's tape, it'll move pretty well. Again, just make sure all of your edges are really nicely firm and down so that there is as little bleed as you possibly can whenever you get to the next step of spray painting. Now that our templates are down and our helmet is all nice and covered so that we don't get in this overspray all over it, I'm taking my Montana Gold Shock White and just going over those stencils to get those nice, crisp allies. I've read that you really should take your painter's tape up off of your prop or whatever you're working on as soon as you're done spray painting, just to kind of minimize the chance that your paint is going to peel away after the fact whenever it's all done and cured. So that's what I'm doing here, and it seemed to work out pretty well for me. And it was at this point in filming where I decided to stop filming because I really needed to concentrate on getting everything looking as good as I could for the customer. And so I'm just gonna kind of be walking you through what I did instead of actually showing you the progress. To get all of the yellow onto the helmet, I basically used an altered form of making a template as I did before with blue's painter's tape and sprayed on the yellow. I used this really pastel yellow called Butter from Montana Gold. It worked pretty well. Once all of the yellow and white was dry, I went back in with a little bit of silver mini paint and I just hand drew in all of those lines. That was really difficult, but in my opinion, it would have been a lot more difficult to go back in and do all of the masking tape to do that. and there would have been way more room for error in terms of spray paint and bleed, so I liked that I went in and just hand painted everything. The rangefinder was just attached to the helmet with an M3 screw and a hex key that I used to get that screwed in there, and the little plate that's on the outside of the rangefinder is just glued on, but you could also use magnets if you wanted to remove that in the future, or if you wanted to like remove your rangefinder for transit and things like that. And for the weathering on this helmet, I kind of used my standard method of using a black wash and doing some sandpaper, but I did something just a little bit different because whenever you look at all of the art and all of the renders from the Clone Wars series, everything looks like it's been painted on with a brush. And had I thought of this beforehand, I probably would have actually just, painted all of this paint on with a brush so I could have gotten that effect. But what I ended up doing was just using my black wash, using a little bit of water, and then painting all of that black wash water all over the helmet and leaving it on there for just a little bit longer than you usually would. So in case, I think I left it on for about a minute and a half, and then I would wipe it away with a blue shop towel or a lintless paper towel. And when I was happy with how that was looking, I went back over it with a little bit of 400 grit sandpaper and just scuffed up the surface till it was looking nice and dirty. For my visor, I just used another welding visor that I will link down below for you guys. And to start, I made a template out of some construction paper that I had laying around. Cut that template out of my welding visor and then put it inside of the helmet and use my heat gun to shape it along the curves of the inside. To attach the visor, I just used this 2-part epoxy, mixed that up, and stuck it on some of the contact points on the inside. And for the padding inside of the helmet, I just used this upholstery foam that I got from Joann's in the remnants bin, always check your remnants bin, and I cut it into little slivers and just hot glue that onto the inside of the dome. And that's all that there is to it. There's an Ursa Wren cosplay helmet all ready to go off to my friend Katrina. I can't wait to see what she does with this, and I can't wait to see her cosplay of Ursa Wren. She's one of the most underrated characters in Star Wars, if you're asking me. As always, guys, thank you so much for watching and commenting and liking and all that stuff and subscribing. I appreciate you guys so much, and I try to get back to you as best as I can. And as a reminder, I do sell these in my Etsy store if you want to check those out and get one for yourself. And I'll see you guys next time. Bye!